Chapter 66. Jason's Audacity. Neil's attention was drawn to the cell phone on his desk when it vibrated. Knowing that he had left Zen without informing his uncle, Neil thought General David might be the one calling. Picking the phone up, he realized it wasn't his uncle. He noted an unfamiliar number had sent him a string of messages, including images and a video. Without bothering to investigate the contents further, he casually stowed the phone back onto his desk, refocusing on James. "I'll manage all business meetings on FaceTime from Zen, just like I've always done in the past. I cannot stay in Mirage Mesa," Neil asserted with resolve. "But before I leave, I will assign more competent workers to the company." Neil continued to explain everything that needed to be done in the company and what James would do. With effortless ease, he checked through a few documents on his desk and navigated through how the company should be run, earning James's silent admiration for his seamless control. It was rare to find someone with so much control over his workers, even though he didn't see them every day. James had been in the company every day and he'd seen how Fabian wasn't feared by the staff, who did as they pleased in the building. However, just today that Xavier stepped in, everyone seemed too anxious to please him so they wouldn't lose their jobs. Who would want to lose such a job with an incredibly high salary? The Galvera enterprise was one of the top in the country. The company had secured major partnerships, implemented cutting-edge technologies. It had demonstrated exceptional leadership, leading to a dominant position in the market. Not even the Rodrigo Enterprises was close to the Galvera, which was why Calvin Rodrigo was trying his best to dominate the company and be the king of the business world. As James thought of how Xavier had been managing the company from overseas, he held more respect for his boss. However, he couldn't help but ask, "What if the board of directors opt to press charges against you for refusing to approve the payment for their annual bonus fees?" It was already in the bylaws of the company that directors were paid the annual fees, but now that he had refused them the payment, they could sue him for it. However, Neil didn't care less. His cold, gray eyes exuded nonchalant indifference as he curtly responded, "Let them press charges. I'll sue them all for attempting to scam me of my rights." Leaning back in his chair, he added, "And as for Fabian, I'll deal with him before I leave Mirage Mesa." Fabian was a distant cousin of his from his mother's side. However, when Fabian approached Neil years ago for a job opportunity at Galvera Enterprise, Neil thought he was intelligent and chose him as the president after the interview. But it appeared that Neil had overlooked Fabian's true intentions of making the company go bankrupt. Neil pushed aside thoughts of his cousin and focused on the tasks that needed to be completed so he could leave Mirage Mesa as soon as possible the next morning. He didn't want to stay in a place that held such conflicting memories of both happiness and abandonment. The city's very air made him resent it even more. This morning, as his Rolls-Royce drove him through the streets of Mirage Mesa from the airport, Neil had felt an overwhelming urge to turn around and go back to Zen. He could still vividly recall the image of his 13-year-old self, walking barefoot with tattered clothes and a bruised face and legs, begging for food while people avoided him like a contagious disease. "Please make a hotel reservation for me where I can stay for the night. I'll focus on finishing the paperwork for now," he instructed James, determined to keep his mind from wandering to the past. "Wait." Before James could walk out of the office, Neil stopped him. And without looking away from the documents he was going through on his desk, he calmly said, "Send a message to that bastard Rodrigo and tell him to take his filthy eyes off my company, and if he doesn't do as I advise." His voice dropped dangerously. "I will fucking stew his old ass." Away from the Galvera Enterprise, inside the magnificent building of the Rodrigo Enterprises, Calvin Rodrigo could be seen sitting gracefully on his office chair with a cigar between his fingers, the thick smoke swirling around him like clouds. His brown eyes were narrowed in wonderment as he listened to the message delivered to him from Xavier Galvera. "He said that?" He laughed in dry amusement. "It seems this Xavier is nothing like his father, Noah. He has the guts to insult me. Interesting." Calvin inhaled his cigar and looked up at his assistant, who had just delivered the message from Xavier, along with the news that his executive and Fabian were being treated in the hospital with broken noses and purple eyes. "That idiot Fabian is nothing but a fool. How did he allow Xavier to find out about the deal I made him?" Calvin slammed his fist on his desk. "I can't believe I lost yet again." For years now, Calvin had wanted to take control of everything that belonged to Noah Galvera. He wanted to ridicule him in his grave by taking everything Noah had ever worked hard to build in this world. Noah had dared touch his wife and slept with her behind his back, and Kelvin wasn't satisfied with just killing the man. He wanted more. All of his properties, but it seemed with his son in the picture, things weren't going to be easy. However, Kelvin wasn't in a hurry. He would take his time in dealing with the son when the right time comes. "Did you receive any messages from Simon regarding the whereabouts of my wife?" he inquired of his assistant, who was also a member of his clandestine organization in the country. The majority of his employees in all of his companies were part of his organization, and they were all skilled in the art of concealing themselves in the camouflage business. "No, sir. Our men are still searching for her, but it appears that your wife may have passed away because there are no." Before the assistant could finish his sentence, the ashtray on Kelvin's desk flew towards his face. He had no time to evade it, and it struck his nose with force. "It is your wife who is dead. Ella is alive. She is just playing hard to get like she has been doing since I first married her," Kelvin exclaimed angrily. The assistant, who had been hit with an ashtray, clutched his broken nose as he nodded his head. "Yes, she is alive, sir. Mrs. Rodrigo is alive," he chanted for the fear that he would be hit again. How could he have forgotten that his boss loved his wife so much and would never believe the possibility of her being dead? Only after hearing the assistant's words did Kelvin rest back against his chair. He took a deep drag of his cigar and spoke again with a calmer voice. "We will stay away from the Galvera company for now until I find a way to get rid of Xavier," he said, "and tell the men to keep out on the investigation on finding out who that Wayner boy is. Also, have you received any feedback from that young man from Whispering Way? He did a good job when he was just a boy. I know now that he is all grown up, he would do even better in selling the goods for us. Contact him again and see if he has changed his mind about not being a part of us." "Yes, sir. I will send the message immediately," replied the assistant, while still holding his nose. Thank goodness his boss wasn't holding a gun. He would have been shot dead by now instead of the ashtray that collided with his nose. Neil didn't leave the company until the sun was starting to dip into the horizon and leaving the sky with its red and orangish hue lights. As the black Rolls-Royce drove him towards the hotel where James had made the reservation for him to stay for a night, Neil leaned his back against the seat so he wouldn't look out to the familiar street of Mirage Mesa. He closed his eyes to relax for a while. He was too exhausted both emotionally and physically, but he wasn't sleepy. The last time he had a good sleep was when he slept beside her, Mia, on his bed that day. Surprisingly, he had slept peacefully without having nightmares of blood and death. He didn't know if it had been because of the rain or because of her, but he wished he could have a sleep like that at this moment. He wanted to sleep like a boy with nothing to worry about, but he knew he was just kidding himself for even thinking he could have such good sleep again. Perhaps he had been cursed by all the millions of families he'd killed 2 years ago. Perhaps he would never have a good night's rest until he confessed to the world of his deeds. But then, how come he slept peacefully when she was there? He could still remember the softness of resting his head on her chest. He had subconsciously moved to that position in his sleep, but he had enjoyed every minute of using her breasts as his pillow. Though he had been sleeping the whole time, when her hands began to roam around his hair and face, he had woken up. He had felt he was holding her and resting his head on what seemed like her chest, but he didn't want to wake up completely for the fear that he would never be able to fall asleep again. Unfortunately, she had kicked him off his own bed. Recalling her audacity of calling him a pervert after he'd taken care of her through the rain, a deep scowl settled on his seemingly resting face. He would admit the girl was a bit bold among the women he'd encountered. Most women would hide in a corner by the tone of his voice. But little Mia was nothing like that. She would even make him repeat himself before she would do what he'd ordered. He didn't know why he had even offered her to work for him in his house when he could just make her give him the information General David wanted him to get from her. But then the thought of eating a meal like the one he'd eaten in her room when he was shot was worth dealing with her audacity until his mission was over. Her dimpled, smiling face suddenly flashed into his mind, but then he blocked the image away from his head when he recalled how she had stood beside her childhood sweetheart when her townspeople were preparing to gang up on him. He had gone through the trouble of driving her home, but she had dared to run to Owen instead of supporting him, the victim. She had dared to forget about her childhood with him and made a bond with that senseless man. Was he that easy to forget? Not just him, she had forgotten about the life she lived here in Mirage Mesa. As Neil was relaxing while the thoughts of Mia swirled through his mind, his phone vibrated. He scowled in displeasure at who dared to disturb his peace. He pulled out the phone and saw it was a random notification to a promotional offer. He cursed under his breath and was about to switch off the phone, but then noticed the unknown number that had sent him messages earlier. He tapped on the message to see what the photo and video messages were all about. However, playing the video, his nonchalant expression darkened slightly as he recognized Jason in the video, who was being intimate with a woman in a red dress. Who was the bastard who sent him Jason's video? Neil thought in displeasure. Jason was the last person he wanted to see. His face alone was enough to always ruin his mood. The person who sent this must be attempting to ruin his already ruined mood. Neil was about to exit the video when he suddenly recognized the woman in a red dress. What was she doing with Jason? Neil would have ignored the video and pretended like he wasn't irritated by the fact that she was with his rival, but when he saw the message written to him. Her lips taste like ripe berries. And her breasts were as soft as a baby's behind. I enjoyed every second of kissing her. Why didn't you tell me the girls in my little sister's school are this fresh and sweet? I have gotten my new plaything, Wayner. So keep your hands off her. Red fury boiled within his veins. His fingers tightened around the phone until the screen made a cracking sound. He saw nothing but red as he imagined Jason's hands roaming around her body. Without thinking twice, Neil barked orders at his driver, "Turn back and drive me back to the airport." Chapter 67. Lost big time. After Mia finished shopping with Rain and her brother, she was physically and emotionally drained. She had never known shopping to be this stressful and time-consuming. Not to mention, she had to try her best not to grimace at how Jason was trying to do things for her. If he wasn't the brother of her best friend, she would have really succumbed to the urge to distance herself from him. She had only meant to escort Rain to buy a dress, but he had forced countless expensive dresses on her. Forcing the dresses on her wasn't the problem here. The problem was how he tried to act somehow intimate with her. Perhaps she was overthinking it, and he was just being nice to her because she was his sister's friend, but being around him wasn't something she would look forward to again. He had been generous enough to get her shoes as well, which she was grateful for as she would be needing them for the upcoming event in their school, but she bet she wouldn't be wearing all these dresses he forced on her. She liked the red one, though, because it looked more decent. Currently, Mia was sitting in the car with Rain, who had insisted on dropping her home despite her reluctance. Though she was grateful that Jason had gotten an important call from his father and left immediately after they were done shopping, with the words that he would meet her again. He even exchanged numbers with her. However, Mia hoped they would never meet again and he would never call her. "I can't believe Jason is interested in you, Mia," Rain remarked, wrinkling her nose in disgust. "You are too good for my brother, and I hope you don't fancy him like other girls who go crazy about him. He's arrogant and unreasonable, and I'm surprised he was even smiling and helping you to shop when he never pays attention to any of my friends." Mia smiled at her friend's impression of her older brother. Even though Mia didn't like him that much, she wasn't going to badmouth him to his sister. "Jason isn't that bad. He seems kind and generous, I guess," she remarked with a tone of uncertainty, as she didn't know the man enough. Apart from the fact that he was always on TV shows and news, she knew nothing about Jason Wallace. Rain laughed out loud at her friend's uncertain tone, and as usual, she hit Mia's shoulder out of her habit of hitting people when laughing. "That's why you're my best friend. You are not crazy about my brother, and I like your honesty. Most of my friends in high school would do anything to get his attention. I don't know why they all like an attention seeker like Jason." They both laughed at that as they both knew how much Jason Wallace loved being on camera. When Rain was in high school, all the friends she made weren't genuine to her because they were all being close to her just to get her brother's attention, but Mia was different. She wasn't friends with her because she wanted to gain something from the friendship. She genuinely liked her despite people in school bullying and calling her "Carrot Top" for having red hair and freckles. It was rare to find a friend who'd like you for who you truly are in the wealthy class, and since Rain had found one outside her wealthy circle, she intended to cherish it and make sure her brother never does anything to hurt her friend or even think about dating her. Rain smiled with Mia when she looked towards her. They continued to discuss casual topics as the chauffeur drove towards Whispering Way. However, this time, Mia was quick to tell them to drop her at the junction to avoid unwanted attention. When the car pulled over at the junction, Mia stepped out, holding 6 shopping bags in both hands. She waved to her friend as the car pulled back onto the main road and zoomed off. Looking down at the expensive logo shopping bags in her hand, she sighed deeply and began to walk down the street. The sun was beginning to set behind the horizon, and its warm, golden lights illuminated her figure, making her look even more beautiful and flawless. Her curly brown hair shone against the golden glow, and her face looked like that of an adorable doll with large brown eyes that looked more prominent in the sunset. As she walked down the street with the bags, she was completely unaware of the man looking at her from across the street with a broken expression. He was clutching tightly to the alcohol bottle in his hand while she walked past him without even noticing him. Or perhaps she was pretending not to notice him, he thought bitterly. Owen had seen her get down from the car, and seeing the expensive shopping bags in her hands, his heart shattered into pieces. It was as if today was meant to be the day he would lose everything in life. He had gone to school only to be told he had been expelled and would never be allowed into the school premises ever again. They didn't give him any reason and sent him out. He was in his final year and had been working hard to finish his studies, but everything came to a scratching end in the blink of an eye. He hadn't just been expelled from school, he had also lost his side job. Mia, the only person who he had wanted to be a good person for, had also refused to speak to him again. She was the reason he decided to pursue a good career in life so he could give her a better, decent life when he would marry her someday. But she also turned her back on him because he wasn't rich enough to drive her around in a Ferrari and limo. He wasn't rich enough to take her shopping in an expensive mall. That could be the only reason she wasn't going to ever see him more than a friend, because she must also believe he was a loser with no money to spoil her like that man with gray eyes. He had tried to call her when he realized he'd lost everything in life, but she had ignored his calls. He wanted so badly to lean on and talk to someone who cares, but nobody cares. Not even his own father cares. He was finished now, with nothing to do but to be a waste like his drunken father. Owen laughed bitterly and gulped down the content of the alcohol bottle in his hand. He might as well start practicing to be an alcoholic because there was nothing in life for him to pursue anymore. He had lost big time. Mia entered her room and sighed in relief. Home sweet home, she thought as she put the shopping bags away on one side. Today happened to be a roller coaster ride. She had gone to school with the fear that she had lost her scholarship, but some mysterious man in Mirage Mesa had come to her rescue and secured her education. The more she thought about this Xavier Galvera, the more she felt like she knew that name from somewhere but couldn't pinpoint where. Apart from the fact that Ms. Adams mentioned him being a successful businessman in Mirage Mesa, Mia felt like she had personally known the name in the back of her memory. Wait, now that she thought about it, she had come across an article about a company named Galvera Enterprise in the newspaper. Perhaps that was why it sounded familiar to her, Mia thought as she made her way towards her bed. Before she could throw herself on the bed, her eyes fell on the gray clothes she had intended to give to a dry cleaner when she came back from school. She felt her heart sink at the fact that she wasn't able to check on him today. He hadn't shown up in school and his phone was still unreachable. She had been worried in the morning that perhaps that stone had caused a lot of damage to his head and that was why he wasn't able to come to school. Mia picked up the clothes and folded them up while making a mental note to go to his apartment tomorrow and check up on him if he still didn't come to school. She disliked Owen's irresponsible and foolish act of throwing a stone at him yesterday. What if he had injured his lovely eyes? The thought made her furious. Those eyes were too beautiful to be damaged. In order to distract herself from Owen and his actions, Mia decided to first check on her mother before returning to her room to take a shower. Little did she know that an unexpected someone would be waiting for her upon her return later in the night. Chapter 68. The Presence in Her Room. Mia made her way to her mother's eatery, where the comforting aroma of home-cooked meals enveloped her. She found her mother serving a customer, her smile widening upon seeing her. "Mia, sweetheart, how was your day in school?" Elizabeth smiled warmly as her daughter walked into the eatery. "It was fine, Mom." Mia replied with a smile of her own and took a seat on one of the chairs in the eatery. She watched as her mother exchanged a few words with her customers before walking back towards her. Wiping her hands on her apron, Elizabeth said, "Good to hear. You hungry? I can fix you something." "Not right now, I just wanted to check on you." As usual, Elizabeth's expression looked concerned as she noticed a little weariness in her daughter's expression. "Everything okay, dear?" Mia smiled. "Yeah, just a bit tired. You know, school stuff." She was actually tired from all the moving around in the mall with Rain and Jason. And she knew her expression betrayed her weariness. Elizabeth, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder, said, "Well, if you need anything, I'm here." "Did you happen to see Owen today?" He hasn't come by the eatery, and I was wondering if you two were having one of your little spats again. What happened last night was nothing like the little spats they used to have in the past, Mia thought. But knowing that her mother didn't know about it, she decided to keep it that way. Setting boundaries was what she wanted to do with Owen. And knowing he would finally come around to visit the eatery, Mia didn't think too much about him and said, "No, Mom, I haven't seen him today." Elizabeth looked a little concerned that he hadn't come to her today, as he rarely missed visiting her in the morning before school and coming to assist her after school. But then she thought he might be busy with something, and dismissed his thoughts. Mia, who was about to speak again, was drawn to a snack jar on the table of the chair she was sitting on. It was her favorite snack since she was little. "Mom, did you make these?" "Oh yeah, by the way, I made it for you. Thought you might enjoy them as a side snack in school. Take them with you when you're going back to the house." "Thanks, Mom, that's really sweet of you." She hugged the snack jar and beamed up at her mother, who was thoughtful enough to make the snacks for her. It had been her favorite as a child, and it would forever be. Mia didn't immediately return to the house because she helped her mother wash the dishes before picking up her snack jar and made her way back home. It was already evening. Around 8:30 p.m. she would go back home and take a shower before coming back by 9 o'clock to help her mother close the eatery. As Mia entered the apartment, humming to herself, she headed towards her room. The room was dim since she hadn't turned on the light, but she was taken aback to find that the window, which she always closed after Mr. Ice Cube's warning, was now open, with the curtains swaying in the breeze. She hesitated to enter, as she could feel a presence in the room, causing the hairs on her arms to stand on end. She didn't know whether to simply turn back and go wait for her mother or to brave it and walk towards the light switch. "Robbie, kitty, if you can hear me, come to Mama," Mia called out to her cat, hoping to have some company as she would walk towards the light switch. She couldn't tell if someone had entered her room through the window or if it was just her imagination, influenced by all the horror movies she used to watch, which mirrored her current situation where the victim would return home and encounter a serial killer or some demonic being waiting in their room to kill them. Why was she even scaring herself for no reason? Demons weren't real, and no serial killer was on the lookout. Apart from her psychopathic professor, no idiot would climb up to her window on the top floor. And her professor was sick at home, so she was probably imagining things at this moment. There was nothing in the room, and she would walk to the light switch and turn it on. Mia thought. However, despite that, she didn't move away from the doorway to enter the room. She laughed nervously, hugging her snack jar to her chest. "If you are here to scare me, you better think twice, ghost. I am not easily frightened, and..." "Then why don't you walk inside?" came a deep, smooth, masculine voice from her bed. Before she could register the fact that the voice sounded familiar, Mia had already let out an ear-damaging scream that made the person on her bed frown and glare towards the doorway. "Shut the fuck up and turn on the damn light, woman," he ordered with a hint of irritation in his voice. Why do women always like to scream instead of defending themselves against whatever frightened them first? Hearing the voice again this time, Mia was about to prepare for another scream when she quickly shut up as she recognized the voice. What was he doing in her room? She would be stupid not to recognize his authoritative tone and arrogant voice. Mia, flustered by his sudden intrusion, fumbled toward the light switch, her hand slightly shaking as she turned it on. The room was immediately bathed in a soft glow, revealing the man sitting casually on her bed as if he owned it. His imposing figure was enhanced by the black business suit he was wearing, its jacket carelessly tossed aside on her bed. His tie was loosened with his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the top, his sleeves rolled up to reveal his toned, inked forearms that were bulging with muscular veins. He looked like a business tycoon ready to dominate the world with his overwhelming presence. His black hair looked a bit messy, like he'd run his fingers through them several times. He looked intimidating without even trying. The only thing that gave away his weary expression were the dark circles under his eyes. He looked like someone who hadn't slept for weeks. His gray eyes were abnormally narrowed into a slit as he glared at her as if she had committed an unforgivable sin. Mia subconsciously swallowed hard as she felt a nervous shiver down her spine. He continued to regard her with a nonchalant, intimidating attitude, as if she were the one trespassing instead of the other way around. Wasn't she supposed to be the one giving him that look for entering her room without her permission? How did he even open her window when she made sure to lock it? Putting her hands on her hips, Mia demanded furiously, "What the hell are you doing in my room, Professor Bennett?" It was completely inappropriate for him to enter her room in her absence and sit on her bed like he had the right. She wouldn't have gotten the backbone to speak if she wasn't in her house. The last time she used his things, he had gotten furious as well. Neil raised an eyebrow, a cold smirk playing on his lips. Your scream nearly shattered my eardrums, Harrison. Thought I'd save you from the horror of darkness. Plus, you left your window open even though I warned you to always keep them closed. He remarked nonchalantly. Neil had returned to Zen in no time because he had used his private jet. He had wanted to go straight to that bastard Jason and make him regret ever sending him those pictures and video of him and Mia, but then realizing that Jason had purposely sent him those images to irk him into confronting him, Neil had thought twice about going to the Wallace mansion and causing a scene that could affect his disguise. Despite the strong urge he was feeling to beat some sense into Jason, Neil had held back. And since he had used every bit of willpower to stop himself from going to Jason, he had found himself driving towards Whispering Way instead of going home. He didn't like the fact that someone else, not to mention someone like that idiot Jason Wallace, was hitting on his childhood little sweetheart. He might not be the same boy he was 15 years ago, but once he had his eyes on something and was determined to figure that thing out, he hated it when someone else puts their filthy eyes on it as well. Mia Harrison, Neil thought with dry amusement, was a woman he was determined to figure out. He was determined to know what mystery lay behind her and what was wrong with her memories. She was his to figure out for as long as he was Leo Bennett, and the fact that Jason was starting to put up shit to irk him made Neil want to make sure that she would never look past him and fall for someone as stupid as Jason Wallace. And she dared not fall for him as well, because he was going to break her along with her heart. Neil Wayner didn't do love. He did things for his amusement and curiosity, and not until that curiosity was satisfied, he'd never walk away. Mia glared at him, irritation mixing with the relief of seeing that his forehead wasn't as bad as she'd thought it to be. But she wasn't going to overlook the fact that he invaded her room. Breaking into my room more than once is starting to be your favorite thing to do, right, Mr. Bennett? A humorless chuckle roared out of his throat as he looked away from her and relaxed his tired back against the pillow behind him. I needed a place to crash for a while. Your place seemed as good as any, Harrison. Close the door behind you before owner comes rushing in to check on you after your screaming a moment ago. Mia crossed her arms stubbornly against her chest. This is not a hotel nor hospital, Mr. Bennett. You can't just waltz in whenever you please. By the way, his name is Owen, not owner. Neil closed his eyes, looking unfazed. Well, here I am. Deal with it, and I don't care what his name is, he said in a calm, arrogant voice. Mia sighed, realizing arguing with Mr. Ice Cube was futile. He was an arrogant man who would do as he pleased without a care in the world. And it seemed today he had decided to turn her place into a hotel, just like he had turned it into a hospital days ago. She closed the door behind her and locked it from the inside so no one would barge in to find her professor resting on her bed. As Mia walked back into the room, she couldn't help but ask, "Why didn't you come to school today?" Without opening his eyes, Neil replied, "None of your business, Harrison." Mia rolled her eyes, muttering, "Unbelievable," as she thought again how arrogant he was. She hoped he wasn't planning to spend the night in her room. Not that she would mind it that much, but, of course, she would mind. She was a woman, and a man, who wasn't her boyfriend or anything, wasn't supposed to enter her room as he pleased. Chapter 69. I don't want you accepting gifts from Jason. Mia shot a glare at Neil as she walked towards her sofa next to the window, settling down with a deliberate thud. Her glare intensified, dissecting the man on her bed. Despite his eyes being closed, his expression remained intimidating, furrowed eyebrows, lips pressed into a determined, stubborn line. One of his hands supported the back of his head, showcasing the muscularity of his bulging arm that was bent to support his head, while one of his legs was bent on the bed, the other straight. His relaxed posture indicated a careless sprawl that seemed to claim the space as if it were his own private domain. How could one look so dangerous and yet good-looking at the same time? Mia thought as she swallowed hard. Her professor was like a tyrant that people should stay clear of. His expression and demeanor were not welcoming, yet his looks and aura would make one want to get on his good side. As much as she wouldn't like to get involved with him, he kept appearing at the least moment she expected him to. While she appreciated his good looks and captivating eyes, Mia wasn't like the other girls in school who would go to great lengths for his attention. Take Diane, for instance, who even created a fictional love story with the professor on the school forum. Yet, what confused Mia was why he kept involving himself with her instead of any of the other girls. What did someone as confident and masculine as Mr. Bennet see in someone like her? She didn't possess the same level of beauty as the other girls, so why did he choose to come to her place not just once, but twice? As Mia continued to look at the man on her bed with a deep frown while trying to wonder what he could possibly want from her, to the point that he offered her to work in his house and even bought her a guitar, his deep voice broke the silence, husky and unwavering. "What did you do today after school, Harrison?" Pursing her lips, Mia wondered why he cared. "Why does it matter to you?" "It's none of your business," she retorted, with her chin raised in a stubborn manner. When she had asked him why he didn't come to the university today, he had told her that it was none of her business, and now he was asking her what she did after school as if they were friends. It was also none of his business. His eyes snapped open, gray orbs locking onto hers dangerously. Mia's heartbeat unconsciously sped up, and she nervously swallowed as his piercing gaze always made her want to flee. However, since she was in her own room, she remained in her seated position. "What did you do after school, Harrison? I asked you a question. Don't make me repeat it for the third time or you won't like the consequences," he calmly warned, with dark amusement dancing in his eyes. This was why he always claimed the girl was different. She never did as he said unless he repeated himself, which he hated doing. As a major general in the army, he was accustomed to people swiftly obeying or responding to his requests without needing to be prompted again. Yet this young woman always challenged his words. Neil would have been annoyed if it had been one of his soldiers questioning his orders, but it was this petite woman who always foolishly displayed bravery. If her audacity truly provoked him like it did with others, he could easily break her neck in an instant. However, surprisingly, it didn't irk him, and as long as her stubbornness didn't push him too far, she would remain safe. He had killed when angered before. Mia, noticing the challenging gaze in his eyes that dared her to defy him once more, she didn't dare to tell him it was none of his business anymore. She pressed her lips together and softly murmured, "Rain and I went to the shopping center after school." "Who else went with you?" he demanded, his tone carrying an air of authority. "Jason Wallace," she replied, watching as his eyes seemed to darken at the mention of Jason. Did he know Jason? Of course he would know Jason Wallace. Almost everyone in the country knows who he was due to how he was always on TV. Just the mention of that name was enough to ruin Neil's mood. He had known that she had gone shopping with Jason, but he just wanted to confirm to know what kind of relationship they both had. Because in those photos and video, she looked quite comfortable with him running his fingers into her hair and leaning down as if to whisper sweet nothings into her ears. They looked like a loving couple shopping. Recalling the images, Neil felt his blood boil again. As if no longer interested in relaxing anymore, Neil sat up on the bed, his arrogance and pride on full display. He ran his fingers through his black, thick locks and then turned towards Mia. "Did you bring anything from the mall?" His voice held a hint of controlled anger, making Mia shiver involuntarily. Nodding hesitantly, Mia subconsciously clutched the snacks to her chest, which his eyes followed, the subconscious action. Why was he trying to intimidate her in her own room? Neil gestured for her to come closer. "Come here, Harrison." He beckoned with his index finger. But Mia didn't make any attempt to stand up because he looked like a big, angry wolf ready to devour his little prey. Should she scream for help? Mia thought to herself as his expression began to darken because she didn't do as he said, again. He chuckled dryly and said, "I'm not going to eat you. I just want to taste those snacks you've been clutching tightly to yourself this whole time." Mia, who had been clutching tightly to the jar, quickly let it drop to her lap at his remarks. She hadn't even realized she was holding it to her chest the whole time, and the way he said the words made it sound inappropriate to her ears. But then she still hesitated to go forward, not trusting his words to taste her snacks. But Neil's authority compelled her forward. "Walk to me, Harrison. Don't let me get up," he continued, smirking. "I just want to eat from your snacks," he said patiently. Mia stood up and slowly walked towards him on the bed. She handed him the snacks jar, and he took it from her and calmly remarked, "Have a seat." He patted the space beside him. When she obediently sat down, he opened the snack jar and paused as he realized it was the same kind of snack Mimi used to bring from home to share with him. He used to like it then and would ask his mother to make the same for him, but it never tasted as good as the one his little friend brought along with her to their house. Neil felt an irresistible urge to take a bite of the snack to see if it still had the same taste he remembered from years ago. To his delight, it tasted exactly the same, crunchy and delicious. The fact that this snack was made by the same person from years ago suggested that this person might have knowledge about the girl's messed-up memories. "Who made these?" Neil casually asked Mia as he began to indulge in the snacks from the jar. Mia pursed her lips, observing how he was eating the snacks her mother had prepared for her to take to school. Despite this, she responded, "My mom made them." Neil hummed as he chewed. In their childhood days, he had never caught a glimpse of her mother's face as Mia was always in the care of a nanny. However, his purpose for being here today was not to finally meet her mother, but to address another matter. Neil didn't hold back from savoring the snacks of his childhood. It had been a long time since he had enjoyed something like this. Without paying any mind to the angry glare from the owner of the snacks, he continued to eat as if they were made specifically for him. He remained silent until the jar was nearly empty. Then he placed it on the nightstand and dusted off his hands. Mia felt a sudden urge to cry as she looked at the almost empty jar on her nightstand. She had been looking forward to eating those snacks, but Mr. Ice Cube had finished it up and only left crunches for her. How cruel! Neil stood up from the bed, shoving his hands into his pockets as he cast an indifferent gaze down at Mia. "What did you bring from the shopping center with Jason?" he demanded, his tone calm yet authoritative. Mia frowned, torn between telling him it was none of his business, but recognizing the seriousness in his expression as he towered over her, she chose the latter. She stood up and retrieved the shopping bags containing the dresses and shoes Jason had bought for her at the shopping center. "Show me," Neil ordered, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. As Mia began to bring out the dresses, Neil's eyes caught sight of the red one he had seen in the photos sent to him. His hands clenched into fists, and without a moment's hesitation, he reached out and seized the dress. With a swift, forceful move, he ripped it into two, the sound of tearing fabric echoing in the room. Mia's eyes widened, shock etched across her face as the dress she admired the most now lay ruined in Neil's hands. "Why did you do that, Mr. Bennett?" she exclaimed, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. She had liked the dress among the rest. It was an expensive, beautiful dress from a well-known brand in the country. She had refused to take it when she saw the price tag, but Jason and Rain had insisted because it looked good on her, and she had made the decision to even wear it on the day of the competition. But Mr. Bennett had swiftly ruined it as if it were a piece of paper worth nothing. Neil remained stoic, his eyes fixed on the torn dress. "I don't want you accepting gifts from Jason Wallace," he stated coldly, his arrogance radiating with each word. "Especially not dresses like this trash." Chapter 70. His warning words. Mia's frustration boiled over. "You had no right to do that. You also have no right to tell me who to accept things from." Ignoring her angry protests, Neil tossed the torn dress aside like it was trash. "You're better off without his charity," he remarked, his demeanor unyielding. "Now, show me the rest of the clothes." Mia, clenching her fists to control her own anger, refused to budge. He had done enough in her room. Staring defiantly into his piercing gray eyes, she said, "Leave my room, Mr. Bennett. I won't tolerate your arrogance invading my space." Neil's expression darkened dangerously. "Sending me out, huh?" he sneered. "I'm not leaving until you show me the rest of those damn clothes." "Now bring them out." "I won't." Mia stubbornly refused while standing her ground. She knew he was going to ruin them just like he had with the red one. Even though she didn't like the rest that much, she wasn't going to allow him to ruin them. They were expensive dresses, for goodness sake. How could he just ruin them like they were trash? Neil chuckled darkly as he began to advance on her slowly, and though Mia wanted to stand her ground, she found herself subconsciously retreating backward. "Don't come closer," she warned, attempting to hide her fear, but her trembling voice betrayed her nervousness. Mia's back was soon pressed against the wall. She looked up at him, realizing there was no room for her to move. She was trapped between him and the wall. However, she still decided to act brave. "I won't show you anything. Get out!" Instead of being furious, Neil was amazed by her yet again. Despite being scared, she was still trying to put up a brave front. Her face was red with anger, and her small mouth was pouted in a childish manner, like that of a rebellious little girl trying to glare at an adult. Standing just inches away from her, he could see the sweat of nervousness on her forehead, with strands of hair sticking to it as she continued to glare at him with a mix of anger and what seemed to be anxiousness. What an adorable little rabbit, Neil thought in amusement as his eyes lingered on the hair strands falling down her face and obstructing his view of seeing her full face. Suddenly, he felt an urge to brush the hair away from her face, and without hesitation, he raised his hand to do so. However, Mia flinched and turned her face away, exclaiming, "Don't hit me." Neil paused his action, noticing her fear wasn't because he was trying to intimidate her but because she feared he would hit her. She had flinched just like that night in his condo when he had backed her against the wall and raised his hand. Had she been hit before to always flinch whenever he raised his hand, or was she just scared that he would hit her? Mia had flinched because whenever someone raised their hand in front of her, a scene from her strange nightmare would flash to her memory. It was a scene where an unknown person had hit her across the face. Though she believed it was just a nightmare, it always felt so real, and whenever someone raised their hands, she feared it was because they wanted to hurt her, and before she knew it, she would react subconsciously and try to protect herself. Neil's anger subsided as he observed her turned face and how she was pressing her eyes shut. She looked like a terrified rabbit. Using his finger, he turned her chin towards him. "Look at me," he ordered, his tone holding an unexpected softness beneath his cold exterior. Obediently, Mia looked at him, but she regretted turning to look at him when she realized how dangerously close his face was to hers. He was so close she could feel his warm breath fanning her forehead. Both his hands were pressed against the wall behind her, caging her up. Warmth surged through Mia's veins and her face reddened. Her heartbeat quickened as she realized she couldn't move away to create space between them, and she pressed her palms against the wall behind her, inadvertently seeking support. Why was he standing so close to her? He might be immune to their closeness, but she wasn't. Her heartbeat was a mess. Neil observed the girl's reaction, noting the color on her cheeks and the way she seemed on the verge of merging with the walls due to his proximity. Though he liked making people nervous, he even enjoyed it more when the girl before him looked like a scared rabbit. As she swallowed hard and subconsciously wet her dry lips, his eyes followed the subtle yet provocative movement that made him have an urge to wet the lips for her with his own tongue. But he held himself back as he wasn't the kind to follow such a silly urge. Up close, her large brown eyes were even more captivating. They were as innocent and pure just like the cute little bunny she used to be in their childhood. Looking into her eyes, he recalled how they used to sparkle every time she laughed at her own silly jokes in their childhood. There wasn't a day she wouldn't come to visit him at home in the past. She was always dragging her big teddy bear along with her while calling out for him even before entering their estate. "Zidya, Zidya," she would call with her tiny voice until he would be informed his little friend was looking for him. Back then he would correct her countless times on how to pronounce his name, but she preferred to call him Zidya instead of Xavier. He had liked her more than he liked his childhood playtime with his other friends, but today, they were strangers to each other, with her not even remembering his existence in the past. Lost in the memories, Neil found himself caught up in the enchantment of her gaze. Unconsciously, he murmured in a deep whisper, "How did you forget your Zidya?" Taken aback by his unexpected question, Mia looked up at him with questioning eyes. Huh? She didn't know who he was referring to. How did she forget her Zidya? What was that? Mia thought as she asked in a small voice, "Who is Zidya?" She had never heard of such a name before, and why was he asking her of it? Neil snapped back to his senses and moved away from her. He hadn't even realized he had asked her the question. And what does it matter if she remembered him or not? It was for the best that she had no memories of him, but why was he feeling bad that she forgot about him so easily? Neil looked away from Mia, shoving his hands into his pockets. Even though she meant nothing more than a fleeting amusement to him, he wasn't going to allow her to be with his rival, Jason. His expression turned indifferent as he gazed down at the clothes Jason had bought for her. Without bothering to meet her eyes again, he spoke with authoritative certainty, "Never take anything from Jason Wallace, and don't even think about being in a relationship with him. I'll provide you with more dresses and shoes than he could ever buy for you." "I don't want your," she began to argue, but he cut her off. "I don't care what you want." His arrogance and superiority echoed in his words, leaving little room for argument. "Start your work at my place tomorrow," he added, dismissing any objection that he knew was about to raise up her throat again. Without waiting for her response, he swiftly packed the remaining untouched shopping bags on the bed, and in a blink of an eye, Mia watched him throw them out the window. Her eyes widened in disbelief, but before she could speak, he threw a reminder over his shoulder, "Close your window when I'm gone." Without hesitation, he began to climb down the building using the pipes. Mia rushed towards the window, curiosity getting the better of her. She watched in awe as he descended swiftly, seemingly defying gravity. His feline movement left her momentarily stunned. How was he able to do that so easily without even being noticed by the few people passing by the street below? This man must be a cat in his past life or even a skilled thief. Mia thought, with her mouth left open in wonderment. As he reached the ground, he bent down and began to pack the shopping bags from the ground as if knowing if he left them there she would go down and pick them up. Mia dejectedly watched as he squeezed the clothes and bags and stuffed them together into one bag. He then nonchalantly held the bag over his shoulder and cast one last glance at her before walking away, leaving her standing by the window, wondering about the enigma that was her professor. As she watched him disappear into the night, she was completely unaware of another person, who had been keeping an eye on her window the entire time. The person had noticed the man climb up. Mia remained at the window until she could no longer see his silhouette. Of course, she made sure to close the window and retreated into the room, which now felt strangely empty after the overwhelming intruder had left. If it weren't for the torn red dress and the nearly empty snack jar on the nightstand, along with his suit jacket, which he had forgotten, it would almost seem as though he had never been in the room. He had carelessly left his suit jacket on her bed, which was not surprising considering he never seemed to enjoy wearing them. Mia had observed how he would casually discard them at the university, treating them as burdens in his life. Mia walked towards the jacket and intended to fold it so she could return it along with the clothes he gave her tomorrow. However, as she picked it up, a business card fell out from the inner pocket. Bending down to retrieve it, her eyes fell upon the professional business card with its black background and gold company logo, bearing the name, Galvera. It was a personal business card belonging to Xavier Galvera, the CEO of Galvera Enterprise in Mirage Mesa. Mia frowned upon recognizing the name. Why did Mr. Bennett possess a personal business card from the CEO of Galvera Enterprise?